Hello and welcome to a new episode of Share Green Design podcast. Remember, you can follow us on our website, or you can follow us on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So today we have Gina Ciganik with us, and I will start directly, Gina, asking you about your background and how you ended up being the CEO of Habitable and putting out your time and passion in healthy materials.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I have a little bit of a unusual story of how I got to be the CEO of an organization that does research into the chemicals and materials that we're using and the health impacts of those. I was a real estate developer for nearly 2 decades. I built thousands of affordable housing units. So I was working on a lot of social justice issues. And as I was building these massive buildings, I realized how they disrupted the environment and created a lot of problems. Back then, it was maybe more around energy and water conservation, those kinds of things. And I got more and more interested in what were the products we were using to build these buildings, and how do they affect not only the people in and around the building, but in the whole life cycle. And I was blown away how little we knew about what was in these materials, where they were made, that we couldn't get the information. And when we did, it was written in chemistry. So unless you were a scientist and knew what these things were, it was hard to know what problems were caused. So after I was the first affordable housing building that ever registered for the US based Living Building Challenge. Um, and really started to understand more and more about why we need to figure out these products and the chemicals that were used. So I came over to what is now Habitable. Back then it was
Mhm.
called the Building Network. And after not too long, I became the CEO and working with a group of scientists and researchers and toxicologists to really help translate this information into actionable guidance that non-technical users, non-scientists, can use to implement in their projects.
Mhm. That's very interesting, and also that change in your career, that turning point in your career. So now I think, even though you are doing that work to translate that scientific information into something that everybody can understand, but still there is a long way to go on healthy materials. So why you think we are not aware, not only at looking at developers and companies, but even at personal level, people, normal people, why are we, why do we lack, what do you think we lack that information and awareness about healthy materials and the implications to our health? Because it's about us, it's things that affect us directly.
Yeah, good question. It's a number of things. Unlike things like food or pharmaceuticals or beauty and personal care, where there are laws, especially in the US and Europe and other places, that require those sectors to disclose what is in their products. The built environment has no real laws. There's very little testing, if at any, if any. And so the lack of requirements for disclosing is part of the issue. The other issue is there's a lot of manufacturer marketing that talks about products as healthier than they really are to sell. So it creates some confusion. And then, thirdly, it's this disconnect between the built environment. You don't eat it, you don't put it on, or you don't think you eat it or put it on your skin or other kinds of like you do with food and beauty and personal care. But the reality is, I've learned, you are what surrounds you. So people don't think the paint on the wall or the flame retardants in your sofa or the chemicals in your floor are getting inside you. And so there's less push for knowing those things and selecting better products.
Mhm. One of the things feedback I get when we talk about healthy materials or we talk about embodied carbon and low carbon and things that are, let's say, non-standard or people think consider they are not standard is cost. So when you talk about this, if everybody or most of the people will say that's going to cost me more money. Is that true? So would you think that's the case, or there are ways to find the healthy materials at same cost as non-healthy material or unhealthy materials?
Great question. That's always the first question asked. What does it cost? And we like to talk about several definite. What does it mean? What do you mean by what does it cost? Sometimes it's the first cost that when people are asking, what does that product off the shelf
Yeah.
cost? That's a completed product. So sometimes it might cost a little bit more, but other times, no, it doesn't. You just know what to ask for. If you know what to ask for, you might be able to ask for products that cost the same, cost neutral. There's a performance aspect or a life cycle aspect where a lot of people, especially in the US, buy what I like to call short life plastic carpet. All these carpets that are in rolls or squares that are made from plastic and on average last 3 to 7 years. That get thrown out at the scale of in the US of all plastic bags, water bottles, and straws combined. We don't see that same waste and toxic cost of, okay, then you have to buy another new carpet. So there's this like long-term cost. There's the externalized cost that I was nodding to that a little bit, that somebody is paying for those costs of cleanup, health costs, and other kinds of costs related to cheap materials that are mostly borne by people of color, low-income populations, and children. So there might be a lower cost up front, but in the whole, there's a whole bigger cost many people and the planet are paying for.
Yeah, that's the thing is we need that wider to have a wider picture approach, because you mentioned health, for example. So is your company, or are you aware, I'm sure you're aware, of research that relates the healthy materials, or sorry, unhealthy materials in this case, and healthcare implications? So how much money we have to spend, as for example in your case in the US, to deal with issues related to those materials? Then even though the money is coming from different pots, at the end of the day is cost related to that. So could you tell us about that and refer to that kind of research, where we can find it and where people can read about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of research around that. Not enough, but more and more research. I know a study, I think that was done in Europe. We have it on our website by a group that found that the cost of PFAS, the stain repellents, and Teflon pans, and the chemical that everybody, I think, now is starting to know it's in all of our bodies, and it will last for forever chemicals, so it will last in our bodies and build up over time. The costs around that are astronomical in terms of health and attempts for cleanup. So compared to the profits that these companies are making. So we have to totally get a different mindset around this idea of costs and include all the math of these costs, and understand a whole mindset about less is more, and simplify our palettes. And there's a whole different approach we need to start taking to really tackle these challenges. And I'm not saying in a scarcity way where we all have to give up everything and live in a tent under a tree or something. There's just beautiful buildings that can be constructed with a simpler palette, a longer living palette, materials that both last longer and are more neutral, so that you don't have to repaint every few years when that color goes out. Put pictures on the wall. If you look at like the study, speaking of cleanups and problems, I was floored when I found out that the biggest volume of microplastics in the ocean and the waterways, it's paint. 58% of all the microplastics in the ocean and waterways are paint, and 48% of that are architectural paints. So let's use walls that don't need paint. Let's get paint made from better materials, and let's not use it as a fad that let's just change the paint. Get some throw pillows and some art and some plants and make the aesthetic in a different way. So those are sort of the mindset shifts of, at what cost do we want to paint different colors every so often, or have the paint degrade and be in our water system?
And you think there is, do you think perhaps one of the main issues is the lack of awareness of people painting? For example, in this case, you're using the example of paint. It's a good one because that's something it's part of what we breathe every day in our houses, offices, wherever we are. Is you think it's a lack of awareness, and how can that be improved? So how can we, what you are saying, don't do that, do this. This is how that painting is. Sorry, that's how this paint is going to affect you. So use less paint, and if you use paint that has less chemicals or unhealthy chemicals. So what do you think could be done to improve that and make people more aware?
Yeah, that's what Habitable is doing. So one of my frustrations as a developer was, I don't know chemistry. I don't know how to pronounce these words. If, in paint, I had to learn how to say alkyl phenol ethoxylates, right? I mean, yeah, I often tell our researchers, never start out a sentence that begins with alkyl phenol ethoxylates, because you lose most the rest of the world. And so, we support all the green building standards and a lot of the materials platforms, and help them and advise them of approaches to select healthier materials. And the route, historically, the industry and all of the groups have gone down, and we've all participated. We've created chemical lists and talk in these chemical terms, and really think about this specific product or this certification. We've created madness, just chaos and madness, where people are choosing different products that appear to be healthier, but not really known to be, because it's not looking at the holistic lens. Many of the certifications look at the use case only, and conveniently, oopsie, forget that some of these products are made from fossil fuels or have devastating manufacturing, process chemistry, or the end of life problems. And so one of the things I found is that we've created this impossible system for any of us to activate in our day-to-day jobs. So one of the things that Habitable, when we were looking at, because I asked the question, is our work making a difference? Are we really solving the problem that needs to be solved? And what problem is it that we're trying to solve? Well, in the planetary boundaries framework is really important to think about the holistic issues of the 9 Earth processes and systems that need to stay in balance in order for human and natural life to exist on this planet. And we're out of balance with 6 of 9 of those boundaries. And so the problem I said we were really trying to solve is sort of one that was announced in 2022, where they did the math on what they call novel entities. Again, scientists using these terms that who knows what that is. It's chemicals and plastics, which are so far out of balance and expected to triple in the coming years. And so when when we think of those, it's overwhelming and it's scientific and it's complicated and it uses language and frameworks that none of us really use in the workflow in the built environment. And so we came up with a way to make what we call informed decisions. So we call this approach informed, that takes more of a role of, how some of the chemistry industry now is looking at classes of chemicals. We're looking at sort of classes of products. So think of flooring as a category, and with the kinds of types of floors that are in there. You can get vinyl floors, you can get cork floors, you can get bamboo floors, you can get linoleum. So if you think of those sort of classes, those types of floors, our team does the hard work. They go look at patents, they're material scientists, so they know where to look and get information. And they make it easy where, regardless of the manufacturer, if it is carpet, if it's linoleum, if it's cork, those products have very, very similar characteristics or chemistries that perform a function. So you can almost, like, you walk into a grocery store. This is the framework we're using. And now you can walk into a grocery store and shop the perimeter. You know that fruit and vegetables are way healthier than candy, right?
Mhm.
Even if a candy bar has almonds in it and coconut flakes in it, it is still a candy bar.
Still a candy.
Know that. And we also know that even if the candy bar certifies that those almonds are organically grown, we're not fooled that that's a healthy food. The built environment, and nor do you have to like look at three different apples and debate, oh, is one going to be healthier? Which one is going to be, apple is an apple. Apple is, and an orange even. Those are way better choices than candy and processed foods, etc. We can now do that in the built environment. So we've created this tool, this approach called Informed, that looks at categories of products and ranks from red to green, worst to best, in that category of product types. So red, we say avoid the red ranked products, vinyl, SPF insulation, those kinds of really, really highly, highly toxic. You don't have to look up all the chemicals. Aim for those that are yellow and light green and dark green. Because if we have a world a built environment community that starts using products that are yellow and green and avoid the red and hopefully lessen the orange colors, we will change the health of the planet. And that makes it accessible to everybody. Just like I was in first grade when I knew candy wasn't supposed to be on my dinner plate. I didn't have to read a label. I just had a general sense. But what we find today is the awareness that you were asking about. People don't know what the kind of quote unquote, what is the candy aisle at the building product store.
And how can that awareness, because you've done all the great work.
Yep.
So the next step is people learning about it. And as you said, if I get that floor, I know it's red. If I get the other one, I know it's green. As we know with food, for example. What is the next step, in your opinion? And how can we help, or any others that care about this, how could they help?
Yeah, engage with us. We have a lot of groups working with us that are rethinking their material strategy and are working on a strategy to step up from red by 2030, combined with their decarbonization goals. So we say take a decarb detox lens, decarbonization, detoxification. And we're doing also research showing how there are some products that are potentially slightly lower carbon, but they're highly, highly toxic and made from fossil fuels and plastic. So it is also working against your climate goals. And so if we can do health and climate combined, we can make optimized decisions that are way healthier for the planet. We're working with several of the green building standards, the global building standards, to use Informed early in the process when you're doing charrettes and schematics, understand what your palette is, try to limit it, avoid any, regardless of the manufacturer, any reds and hopefully orange products, and try to work your way up. So you will be seeing, like the well building standard has a residential pilot that's already adopted. Call it materials modeling, kind of like we've been doing energy modeling. You need to do that at the beginning, because in the energy side, putting in a highly efficient boiler isn't going to solve the problem if you have the wrong orientation massing. So if you're going to be specifying vinyl floors or carpet or XPS insulation or some of the worst polluting products from a life cycle standpoint, that's not going to be changed. It's going to end up, you're going to find certifications for those products too, just like your candy bar is going to come up with a certification for its organic something or other. There are a lot of red and orange products that absolutely get certified. And I'm not saying the certification is saying it's certifying a narrow thing, but it's conflated to assume it means, oh, it's healthy. It might be saying, this one little piece is better. But when you look at it from a whole, we're not going to have a healthy world if we're using vinyl floors and many of those kinds of products in perpetuity.
That's all very interesting. And I'm wondering if you are engaging, for example, with schools, primary schools, secondary schools, or even college, because those young people or teenagers, whatever, kids, they will become clients in the next few years. So if they are aware, they will demand that. And that will force the industry as well. So are you working on that front as well?
That is a brilliant, that's a brilliant insight. We often say the next generation is the systems change. Get them the information. So we haven't gotten down to the grade schools yet, or those, but we are starting to work with different universities so that all architectural students know before they graduate, what products are in the red zone, what are orange, and look at it from a whole life cycle perspective. There are a lot of excited people because like I said, as much as, some of the certifications have helped and some of the disclosure, when we look at the volume of the number of disclosures and certifications on the products, and we've looked at this compared to the volume of products on the market, there's less than about 5% of building products that have disclosures and certs that are highly disclosed and revealed. So even those programs, it is such, I always say, this tiny dot of information, and most products you can't find information on. And so until there's regulation about disclosure and more consistency and requirements for high quality and no tolerance for advertising in a way that is calling a plastic carpet, nature's sunflower or something, honesty in advertising, we're not getting there. And that's why when you look at our recent report that we put out that looked at products used in affordable housing, 70% were yellow and orange. When you look at the volume of products we're using, it's heavily in the worst in class that aren't part of a circular economy, that don't have any real potential for recyclability because of their hazardous content, because they're plastics and made from fossil fuels, keeping our reliance on those. So we've created a whole palette and a system around flawed products. So if we can step up from the red, it opens up the opportunity for innovation, for hemp, for mineral-based paints, for mycelium, for things that the market isn't giving any opportunity to insert and grow.
Yeah, and also you mentioned there the circular economy. So what's happening as well is that manufacturers, and it's not only manufacturers, but we have to be mindful as well that when we buy certain materials, at the end of life, and that's something that's becoming more and more the norm as well, then we need to know what's going to happen at the end of life. So products with those chemicals will be more unlikely to be reused. So the product itself has a lower value as opposed to those products that can be reused in the future. And that's again having a long term view as opposed to the short-term view. So how is that? How is your work linked or related to the circular economy as well?
Yeah, we do a lot of work in the green chemistry area. So we have a database of 200,000 chemicals, not just related to the built environment, but across the board, that start to show you can understand the health implications for at least those that have been tested. The challenge with the circular economy, there was a great paper written by some folks at Google in 2018, together with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, that said it needs to be safe first in order for it to be circular. So circular economy is ending up being sort of a waste reduction and can we recycle this thing at the end of its life, versus it needs to be safe first or the circular economy isn't possible.
Mhm.
The father of green chemistry, John Werner, often says hazard is a design flaw, that if we're making these things in a hazardous way, that's a design flaw that needs to be redesigned in a way that looks at the whole cycle, and that those materials and molecules and things can be brought back to life in a different form. We're nowhere near that. And until we get a different mindset and start thinking about safe then circular, circular is going to be a pipe dream,
Yeah.
a PVC pipe dream.
So the other quick questions before we finish is how all that works in the current context with a growing population, because we are using more and more stuff, and therefore more and more chemicals. So we are making the problem worse.
Yep.
At the same time, there is a bigger opportunity as well. But how you see that? So it's how from a healthy material, not healthy materials point of view, from a health in general point of view. What's your opinion about that growing population and the problem getting bigger and bigger? Well, that's not the question. Is we have a growing problem. So the question is, how you think we could tackle it? So you're creating your database of materials, everything you said earlier. So in your opinion, what should be the first step to tackle that issue?
Yeah, the first step is become aware, start to learn about the issue. I mean, where knowledge is power,
Yeah.
and trust independent science. The challenges with conflicts of interest, when you see the folks working on the global plastic treaties and many of those other efforts, they're talking a lot about conflict of interest and understand the motivations of industry. I'm not saying industry is a terrible thing. I'm just saying industry has profit motivation and other kinds of motivations and to sell things. So independent science needs to be at the core of this without this conflict. Um, yeah, start taking steps up from the worst in class. Quit, looking in tunnel vision. So independent science, trust it. Start making these decisions and prioritize them. Look holistically.
So, and then just to finish, we could continue talking about this for hours because it's a fascinating topic. And actually, in our platform, we don't give enough relevance to it. So I hope we change that as well. So we'll get in touch to publish more information about it and getting more your message more out there. But for those people listening to us, what would you say to them, whether they are professionals and people, as you said earlier, you go to the universities and talk to future architects. What would you say to the professionals already working in the construction industry, or even to people just, that they are not working in the construction industry, but they use paint for their houses and they do it themselves? So what would be your message for those people?
That we have a real opportunity to make change. The built environment is expected to add 2.5 trillion square feet to the earth by 2060, which doubles everything on the earth. So we can look at that as, wow, we can really screw things up, or we can look at the optimistic side. We're in a position that literally can change the health of the planet if we start to engage and do things right. We look at it holistically, trust the independent science, and engage.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And again, I hope we can help you to disseminate your knowledge and all the good work that you're doing at Habitable. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and absolutely check out our website. And I look forward to more conversations with you and your listeners.
Thank you.